for joining. Thank you for joining, and I will appreciate you share the program and like the button if you also like the program. I want to start off by continue this program on issue regard to the Canadian immigration, on how a lot of people are stranded here in Canada, and most people that felt that when they come to Canada everything will be fine, they will find a job, or people that paid almost $22,000 to get an admission to come to Canada for school. Most of them are stranded. Most of them, the work permit they issue to them is restricted work permits. Example, you have like 20 hours to work in a week. And I want people to understand that the work permit issued to you under the international student or school program, which the duration is based on the duration of the period of your program. Example, if you have 2 years diploma program or 1 year, your work permit will be valid to that duration, while you have only 20 hours to work per week. You must understand that these 20 hours you have is not a primary source of income for your school, but it just supplementary supports for you to work and gain some minimum of 20 hours per week in order to support your program, but not something you can rely on, thinking that because you have this work permit, you will use it to continue working to support your school. I will go in details in a while. For joining once again in regard to the Canadian immigration program, on the difficulty people are facing when they migrate to Canada. And if you don't know all this information, you will fall a victim or become a victim of circumstances due to the kind of the policy immigration, the Minister of Immigration. And I can tell you that since 2015, this government took over, Liberal government under the Trudeau administration. At least I can count, if you see on the screen, almost 5 to 7, if not 8 immigration ministers have been subchanged. And this to tell you that the immigration policies is not near to be perfect. And the worst immigration minister I have seen since 15 to 18 years, in Canadian immigration, citizenship and immigration, is the current minister, Mark Miller. I see him as someone who is totally confused about the immigration policy. And I have studied his lifestyle on the implementation of scripts or crafted or recycling immigration policies. The other way around, he will announce that Canada needs a lot of immigration, 400, 500,000 in a year. And everybody will be happy across the globe and say, okay, Canada needs population, they need a lot of people. In other way around, the people they are denying application are more than people they are, allowing into the country. And secondly, the government is deporting more than they're approving. So there is no way to balance the population. That is why the Canada population is not growing, is still what it is for years. You know, according to the statistics, is about 34 million. So if Canada is really accepting immigrants into the country the way they proclaim to be, why is the population not growing based on the margin? The reason why is because they deport people more than they accept. And I'm going to let you hear from the minister himself and understand why I said that the immigration policy in Canada is a crafted one. And the reason I'm saying this is because the Canada Border Service Agency, as I always mention, which is the agency in charge of enforcement of removal of illegal immigrants in Canada, receive at least $60 to $62 million every year to deport immigrants. You must have in mind that there are almost or more than 2 million illegal immigrants across Canada. They detain people every day. They deny people their rights on some certain ways. And there are so many people here for years that have not seen their family. People stay in Canada and wait for application for almost 10, 15 years. Some of them 5 years, they have not heard from the immigration. Right now, you can see in Dubai, because of immigration crisis by people that are illegal, the government of Dubai have set up amnesty, which is going to last for 3 months. In these 3 months, they are going to legalize all the illegal immigrants because they set a goal. One category is those that been in Dubai or United Arab Emirates without visa. Second are the category of people that, run away from their employer. Other people are those that, came as a visitor, but they couldn't leave. You can see that the government set the goal that between 3 to 4 months, everybody will be normalized. But in Canada, for years, the government have been promising to legalize all the illegal immigrants. Even United Nations have weighed in and said, look, Canada is using immigrants as a scapegoat. What I want you to understand is I don't want you to fall a victim of imperfect immigration policy, because in Canada, people are afraid to say something against the government. It's not the way it is, the way you're seeing it on internet. So you can see here during the question and answer for the immigration minister, you can understand and hear by yourself.
The federal government is cutting back on the number of low-wage temporary foreign workers in Canada. Employers will no longer be allowed to hire more than 10% of their total workforce through the temporary foreign worker program. The government says the program has been used to get around hiring Canadian workers in some instances, but not everyone is impressed with the changes.
These changes are going to hurt. They're going to hurt a lot of small businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector, arts and entertainment, travel and tourism businesses, and especially in rural and remote communities.
Mr. Trudeau is using a temporary foreign worker as a scapegoat. And now we are disposable. They use us and now they throw us away.
Mark Miller is the Minister of Immigration. Minister, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'd like to start by having you respond to what we just heard from Raul Gattaca talking about migrant workers as scapegoats, being treated as disposable. What would you say to him?
Hey, you have to come and visit. It's an absolute blast.
Please get out of here. Now.
Is what I'm trying to let you understand is this immigration minister is trying to make things to look odd because he has been implementing a script instead of implementation of a real and accurate immigration policies. I would like you to listen from what he's answering. Hold on a minute.
Rapporteur from the UN that came out and used some very inflammatory words to describe a situation in Canada which shouldn't exist, at least some of the exceptions that he saw to the program. But he saw systemic trends in the temporary foreign worker space and the agricultural space that really shouldn't exist in a country like Canada, where anyone working here, regardless of their origin or status, needs to be treated with dignity and in respect for their rights. As a country, we have grown that sector of the economy substantially. I would note that report in particular saw some very limited abuses, but still ones that shouldn't exist in Canada. And so we've also had a Senate report that has said substantially the same conclusions, but a little sober in their characterization of things. So as a country, as a government, we need to attack those problems at their source. There's a number of measures that we have taken in my department in particular to make sure that temporary foreign workers that are abused can have an open work permit to go wherever they wish. That doesn't attack the core of the problem of employers that are behaving in a way that they shouldn't in a country like Canada. With the announcement yesterday in reducing in the non-agricultural fields the reliance on temporary foreign workers, it's about making sure that the economy is properly aligned in a reality where the economy has contracted, at least the labor market has. So those adjustments are important. But again, we do rely as a country, we've relied quite heavily on foreign labor for areas in the agricultural space and the transformation space, but also places like Tim Hortons where it really shouldn't be happening. And in some cases, it's been depressing wages. And that's something that we, as a responsible government, need to attack. And I think that's what you heard from us yesterday from the Prime Minister, from my colleague Randy Boissonnault, who's responsible for this. And we'll continue to do that.
Well, in fact, some of these groups are saying that you're making the problem worse with some of these changes, that by only allowing temporary foreign workers to stay for 1 year, you're putting more of a financial burden on them, that if they want to come back, there's additional travel costs. What do you say when they say not only are you treating them as disposable, but that some of these changes are going to make it even harder for these people?
Well, there's a lot of folds to answering that question, Catherine. It is a complex one. There is international mobility in a temporary foreign workspace. It isn't the case that everyone wants to stay. It isn't the case that everyone has the opportunity to stay. A lot of people are funding their families at home and do go home after a season of working in fields or in industries that are seasonal in nature. And there are other ones that we have relied too heavily on as a country, and we have that workers here that can fill that space. So there is movement internationally, but it has to be done in dignity and respect of the people that are moving, and that needs to get better in Canada. We need to increase enforcement, make sure that people are living up to the high standards that we expect people to be treated by in Canada. And in large part, we do that. I think the reports that we've seen show that, but there are tendencies that create an unequal relationship between employee and employer that are the roots for some of the systemic issues that we're seeing. And we need to continue to make sure that we're getting that right.
Well, let's talk about that question of the treatment of workers and employers in particular. The NDP has raised this information it received through an order paper question, which says, in essence, that of the federal inspections that are happening, more than 80% of these workplaces are being inspected remotely. Does that seem appropriate to you in a field where there are concerns about abusive behavior?
Well, first, it doesn't surprise me. I would say first and foremost, most of these employers are behaving in a way that is ethical and according to law. There are exceptions. And to the extent that there hasn't been sufficient enforcement, we need to crack down. That includes also provinces that do have a responsibility here. But we also have to get to the core of this, which is abuse by employers of employees that are in a vulnerable position because of their status in this country. So whether that's making abused employees, giving them the ability to be able to work in another space, looking at sectoral work permits, but that all comes with a cost. We're in an era of food inflation, and so it's not a question of making these broad changes without soberly analyzing the impact of what those decisions could have on things that Canadians are paying a lot more for these days. So there's some trade-offs to every decision we make, and I think it has to be done in a measured way and in a surgical way.
Business groups are also raising concerns about some of the changes you're making. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses said, for instance, that for places like, the tourist sector in Banff, for instance, the changes you made are going to make it a lot harder for some of the businesses that operate there. What would you say to those businesses?
I obviously don't want to be callous about it. We are sensitive to the tourist industry. And I don't want to be flip when I say this, but that labor does exist in Canada. In some cases, some employers will have to pay their employees a little more money. Some will have to innovate. But it doesn't come without us being able to have sort of a healthy back and forth with industry, and those discussions will continue so that we can adjust on the fly. We have seen calls on the other end of the spectrum to completely abolish the low stream, the low wage stream, because precisely does what that does. It's just to drive down wages and drive down innovation. But that's nice on a chalkboard. In reality, it means something completely different from people who may get fired. And trying to find that labor, that domestic labor in Canada, isn't as obvious as just going out and throwing up a sign and trying to get a local Canadian person to do it, because often it is in the job sector that Canadians won't do. But to the extent it is, and that space is there, we should be looking domestically for that labor, particularly in an era of affordability and the driving up of affordability challenges we see when we have high volumes of people coming into the country.
It's not just the low wage stream. You're also talking about potential changes to the high wage stream. Are there sectors in particular that you are concerned by?
Well, concerned by, first and foremost, the volume and the growth that we've seen that is unsustainable.
Well,
I think we have seen,
for
when
you
we look at
to
population
catch up from
data,
what the immigration minister is saying and what I meant by creating confusion within the system, it does not make sense that people come here and work for 1 year to go back. They need to come in again. There are thousands of people already in Canada, almost 2 million people illegal. Not only that, as I said, why is the government budgeting up to $60 million every year, deporting those that already groomed into the system that can do the job? Why they bring in other new people, and after 1 year again they have to go? Why on this recycling policy? Why can't the Minister of Immigration and the Minister of Public and Safety sit down and arrange how the immigrants going to be legalized, and they know exactly what are the numbers they have in the system, what are the numbers they have in every sector that's failed the workers? Then they will know the actual population of the total people in Canada. Then they can be able to do what else in terms of moving on to see what are the gap, what are the population needed to fill such gap. It's not that Canada is short of vast land or environment. The population 34 million, in between 33, 34 million for years, that doesn't go up, doesn't come down, based on filling up the gap, bringing or announcing 500 immigrants will be allowed in Canada this year, while 250 is budgeted to be deported. What sense does it make? Those workers you are looking for to fill up the local jobs are already in the system for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, sometimes 12 years, 15 years. Why can't government find an avenue to perfect them within the system in order to, fill up the gap for the job? Why canvassing for people to come and work? You come for the school. Look, the immigration minister, the current immigration minister, is creating confusion within the immigration policy because he's stepping on the toes of the previous policy and implementing the policy that is not workable, implementing the policy that is creating confusion within the system. If you listen to what he's saying, you can understand that the confusion within the answer he's giving is quite confusing, because even you can understand that by listening what he's saying, you can also observe that the confusion is huge, and there is no way he can be able to, fix the system. You can go ahead and still listen to him, because
Had a significant growth in the last 3 years. We have to look at where the market is contracting and where it makes most sense to make those adjustments. Any responsible government has to adjust on the fly. And in an era of high volume of people coming into the country, whether it's permanent levels or in this case, temporary levels, it's responsible for us to look at all those programs.
You talk about having to adjust on the fly, but I mean, you're scaling back the number of temporary foreign workers because the levels got too high. You scaled back the number of international students because the levels got too high. Did your government, to some extent, lose control of the number of people entering this country temporarily?
Well, look, I'd say the adjustments that were made, particularly after COVID, when we had incredible needs for people and just the need to fill spaces in the job market, prevented a recession in this country, probably 2 recessions, Catherine. So when we employ hindsight, we have to make sure we look at the factors we were dealing with at the time. Those factors no longer exist. And in the international student space that I am keenly aware of and have made some substantial and substantive changes, there's more work to be done. But what we saw is an area that got seriously overheated. A number of post-secondary institutions taking short-term gain without looking at the long-term pain for the country. And if there's criticism to go around at all levels of government, we're probably only a level of government not making a cent off in international students. But again, this is a program that aims excellence, and one that I have the responsibility, along with my colleagues in other provinces, to reform. We have to take a look at who's coming into the country, at what volume, and for what purpose, and what are the long-term effects. So that's work that is largely complete, but we still have some adjustments to make in that space, because when we talk about the sort of the pie chart that comprises the people that are temporarily here, a good chunk of that is students, international students, and the postgraduate work permits that come with them.
I appreciate that you're making the argument, prevented a recession or 2, but did you overcorrect? I mean, when you look at the circumstances now and you're having to pull back in all these different areas, were there not missteps?
Look, it's not the argument. The International Monetary Fund, the Bank of Canada has said as much, and it is one of these measures have been almost solely responsible for making the labor force younger, which is incredibly important. Immigration writ large has been incredibly important to do something that a lot of G7 countries have a real challenge doing, and some are failing at, and we've been pretty successful at. That's come with a conundrum in and around affordability, particularly around housing. And when we see those things congeal, when we see an economy that is contracting in areas where we no longer need that help, well, then we have to take another look at it, take a step back and look at a bunch of options to contract, or at least change the policies that have enabled people to come in those numbers. And that's what we're currently looking at as a cabinet.
There's also talk about changing the permanent resident targets. How significant are the changes that you're prepared to make? I appreciate it's still an ongoing discussion, but could we even see levels drop, perhaps?
Well, all options are on the table, Catherine, including a reduction. And I would say, sometimes ministers do go to cabinet with a number of options, with a particular one that's sort of pre-baked. I'm trying to take a look at what Canadians have told me throughout the summers, what economists have told me, what different actors in society have told me, what my own members of caucus and cabinet have told me, and give 3 real credible options about what the pathway forward looks for levels. You'll have to wait for the levels announcement to get the final conclusion on that. But again, it does remain talk for the time being, because we do have to have that discussion in cabinet with caucus and with Canadians, and that pathway isn't completely set yet. But anything does have to be substantial and substantive. Otherwise, it's just an optical operation that does nothing to solve the challenge that we're facing for. And again, this is the one chance that we have as a government to set that level for the next year and the next 3 years before there's an election. So there'll be an aspect of this that will be fixed in stone once we set those levels for the next year.
Minister Miller, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me on, Catherine.
Today's economy is very different from it was 2 years ago. Inflation has started to come down, employment is higher, and we no longer need as many temporary foreign workers. We need
You hear that?
Canadian businesses to invest in training and technology and not increasing their reliance on low-cost foreign labor.
Some have applauded the move, saying it will help with employment rates among Canadian residents, but others say the change doesn't go far enough. Christopher Warswick is the chair of the Department of Economics at Carleton University. Welcome to the program. I'd like to start. You have made a call for the government to abolish the temporary foreign worker program. Can you lay out for me what the case is for making that move?
Sure, Catherine. I mean, the concern with the temporary foreign worker program is that, as the minister said earlier in your show, that firms will become reliant on it. And in fact, in a situation where wages are rising, firms could advertise at the going wage rate. And if the search is unsuccessful, then just apply to bring in temporary foreign workers from overseas. And so a lot of economists in Canada are concerned about the impact this type of program has on wage growth. I've done research with co-authors that suggests that firms may actually anticipate the use of the temporary foreign worker program. They could advertise at a slightly lower wage, maybe even put less effort into their search so that the search fails and they can bring in highly productive temporary foreign workers who might be more mature, might care a lot more about the job because they're leaving a low wage economy. And their ultimate goal may be to become permanent, to become actual immigrants so they can sponsor family members. And this creates this power imbalance that, you know, the UN report alluded to and others have noted, where if the temporary foreign workers really care a lot about their jobs, some unscrupulous employers could take advantage of that.
So I just want to be crystal clear. What you're saying there is that essentially the existence of the program itself actually helps push down wages and sort of creates suboptimal conditions in specific cases. Some employers are, whether they're thinking it through or not, having a negative response to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the very least it slows wage growth, but it could lower wages. And I think there's reasons to think that that's happened from looking at the history.
Now, you were listening to the interview with the minister. You heard him say, great on a chalkboard, this idea of abolishing the program or certainly the low wage stream. But in reality, it would mean people losing their jobs, and some of these businesses simply cannot find Canadians. What do you say to that argument?
Well, some people could lose their jobs if companies are failing, right? So I think the most likely thing that would happen if we eliminated the temporary foreign worker program.
You see, the issue here is that when you are a leader, you need to lead and set example. You don't listen by the left and right for those that are not leader, who are not an expert, who in that faith, you know, to implement your policy, abolish your plan because of what people thought or what people say. In this aspect, it's about the immigrant, it's about the immigration. You heard from the Prime Minister, you heard from the Minister of Immigration. It's about using the immigrants. It's about using them. You can hear the Prime Minister say, okay, they are no longer needed. The need was when there was a COVID-19 pandemic, but now those workers are no more needed. This is not how to treat immigrant for country who proclaim to created the image of allowing immigrants into the country. If they do not want to have a permanent program or permanent policy, why recycling them? And this is what I've been talking about even before the report of United Nations came out. Now it's about election. Election is almost a year around the corner. Now, immigration issue or immigrant will be what will be used to campaign for the election. And after the election, they will slack back. Now they're talking about legalization of illegal immigrants for how many years, using a script and crafted manner, treating immigrants. Those people are human beings. A lot of people came to Canada. Not everybody came on illegal way. There are so many genuine immigrants came here want to settle, that they want to move on with their family, why separating those families that they cannot see their family again, they cannot be able to, communicate, see their family or sponsor them or bring them here? Why is that backlog? Why is that, crafted immigration policy? Why is that recycling of immigrants? If you hear what the Prime Minister is saying, what is the problem? Does it mean that they do not have the power? Does it mean that Immigration Minister does not have the absolute power? Does it mean he does not know what to do? Does it mean he needs to, debate and discuss? How many years now he's promising, look into this, but for actually he knows what he's doing. This is not the right way to treat immigrants, and I'm glad the United Nations have issued a statement in regard to this. This must be stopped, and this immigration minister is the worst I have seen since 15 years or to 18 years, because he knows what he's doing, he's going slow, he's making bogus promises, and you can see when the journalist asks him a question, he diverts the attention. You see, he's not talking like someone who wants to reform the immigration sector. He's talking like an economist. He's talking like, a productivity, somebody who is in charge of kind of productivity or development or economies. It's not about immigration. Someone who's supposed to be on immigration department, heads that department, supposed to know what he intends to do. Very soon, the current immigration minister will be removed, and because this is how they change that cabinet, I think there must be a permanent solution on Canadian immigration, policy instead of being recycled. And other opposition, I don't know why they cannot be able to come up with a credible and sufficient policy. There are so many programs in Canada people can apply, but none of them is working perfectly. How could somebody submit application and wait for years? Does it mean that immigration does not have enough staffs to work, or they don't know what they're supposed to do? I'm saying that the minister, if he cannot be able to do what he's supposed to do, probably he should resign instead of speaking like a minister of finance, other than immigration minister. So trying to dodge the question and make things complicated, stopping this program, stopping this one, I don't know what he's trying to protect other than being crafted. I'm going to let you as well to continue listening to what this immigration issue has been resulting. So, in other words, I will be back in a while. Thank you for continuing to watch, and I would like you to share the program if you feel that you can benefit from our program. And as I said, this issue of immigration policy has been getting momentum almost in United States. I would like you to listen the analysis of the immigration experts in US in regards to this program or the topic we are talking about.
From Canada, with foreign nationals driving a population boom, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced a sharp cut in the intake of low-wage temporary foreign workers. The move will impact thousands of immigrants, mostly from India and South Asia. The immigration program has long been used to exploit migrants, but Trudeau's supporters say it was necessary to address labor shortages in Canada. Now, with rising unemployment, a looming housing crisis, and elections in a year, the stakes couldn't be higher. Our final report has more.
There's a major policy shift in Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced plans to cut down the number of low-wage temporary foreign workers and permanent residents coming into the country, putting Canada at a crossroads. The country for years has been a beacon for immigrants. But now, faced with a 97% surge in population, the Trudeau government is rethinking its strategy. Taking to social media platform X, Trudeau said it's time to overhaul the temporary foreign worker program and invest in Canadian nationals. This program, which allows businesses to hire foreign nationals for short-term jobs, has been under fire for allowing exploitation and depressing wages. Recent reports, including a scathing assessment from the United Nations, have labeled it a quote-unquote breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery. But the criticism doesn't stop here. Labour advocates have long argued that the program is being misused. Employers are using it to bypass hiring skilled Canadian workers, instead opting for cheaper temporary labour. And the numbers back it up. In 2023 alone, nearly 184,000 temporary foreign worker permits were granted. And now, with the unemployment rate at 6.4% and over 1.4 million Canadians out of work, Trudeau's government says enough is enough. Starting September 26, the rules will change. Work permits will be denied in regions where the unemployment rate is 6% or higher. Moreover, the share of low-wage temporary foreign workers that an employer can hire will be cut in half, from 20% of their workforce to just 10%. The impact on the Indian community in Canada will also be significant. India is a major contributor to Canada's temporary foreign worker population, with nearly 26,500 workers in 2023 alone. The country also leads in sending international students to Canada. But recent data shows a sharp decline in study permit approvals, hinting at a broader slowdown in new arrivals. Earlier this year, Trudeau's government acknowledged the crisis by imposing limits on international student visas. And now, with this latest move, the Canadian government aims to bring down the temporary resident population from 6.2% of the total to just 5%. So the government's goal is quite clear: reduce the strain on public services and give Canadian workers a fair shot. But as these policies take effect, the question remains: will this shift help solve Canada's problems, or is it just the beginning of a much larger debate about the country's future?
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up. Kamala!
Thank you for joining back, and we're still on issue of the reduction of foreign workers and the implementation of what I called crafted and recycling immigration policy. So that if you are planning to come to Canada, you must to think twice and to find out that you are taking a right decision, because the projection or the expectation which you may have in mind coming into Canada may not be what you are going to see. Because if you have something reasonable doing in your country, you don't need to sell your things off and jump into flight, coming to Canada thinking that things will be the way you thought in your mind, because the immigration here are very strict. They know what they are doing. They know what they want. They know the population they want allowed. So announcing 500,000 immigrants will come in this year, and having at the back of the policy, the number of immigration that is going to be deported, it does not make sense. It does not tally. It's not something you can, put your mind on, because the civil society, the immigration advocate, the human rights, even the United Nations have issued a statement. Had the United Nations not issued this statement, the government will be denying that such does not happen, in Canada. But this is the reality. So the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, knows exactly what he's doing. Now, it's about the election, maybe probably 1 year around the corner. Now, immigration policy and issue now is coming up so that they can use it to play a game of electoral game, which is not going to work this time around. That is why you come into Canada, you can see that mostly the minority, they are not really doing well. People are struggling, struggling to survive, struggling with their family, but nobody will tell you because people are afraid with the circumstances because they do not want to fish out from the migration or be deported. But if somebody does not take the bull by the horn, explain the situation, other people will not know what is going on. They're still gonna fall the victim. That is why I'm telling you, you're planning to come to Canada, you have to think twice the money you are spending, if it's worth it for you to spend such money and come into the country and become stranded, thinking that 5 years along the line, you're still struggling how to, probably immigration have not answered you from the application you made. So, but do a comprehensive research and tell people the truth of your intention, and so that you can seek a real and fact advice that is the reality on the ground, so that you don't come and become stranded and crying here and there, while you left all what you've been doing in the country. So my point here is, before you plan your journey into Canada, you must make sure that you planned and do a comprehensive research in order to understand what you are going to face. I want you to follow up this and understand.
The federal government is reportedly set to introduce a new string of measures to clamp down on temporary immigrants. The details remain unclear, but follow similar announcements made by Ottawa in January and March. Mackenzie Gray is tracking this story for us. Mac, what do we know?
It's quickly becoming one of the thorniest political issues for the Liberals, Neithu, and Immigration Minister Mark Miller says more changes are coming soon. In an interview with Reuters, Miller says the Liberals will bring in additional measures to limit the number of temporary immigrants allowed to come to Canada. The era of uncapped programs to come into this country is quickly coming to an end, Miller said, adding immigration will be a top issue, if not the top issue, in the next election. Global News asked for an interview with Miller, but his office declined, saying he was traveling. Now, what those changes will look like isn't clear, but it will build on a recent Liberal promise to reduce the number of temporary immigrants in Canada to 5% of the population. That means a decrease in international students, temporary foreign workers, and asylum seekers. But the Bank of Canada is skeptical that that will happen. In a recent report, the bank hiked its projections, saying 2.7 million people, or 6.8% of the Canadian population in 2024, will be non-permanent residents. The bank also said there's significant uncertainty that Liberals will meet their 5% goal. And all those newcomers, through no fault of their own, are putting additional strain on a long-standing housing supply problem.
We've had record population growth in Canada against what was already a constrained supply. So we've had a long-standing housing imbalance in Canada.
This chart from the central bank showing immigration levels all the way back to the 70s, underscoring the massive run-up since 2015. And last year alone, over 1.2 million people were added to the population, Neithu, but Canada only built a third of the housing units needed for those people to live in.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mackenzie.
This is how AI optimizes my
point I'm trying to make here, why is the government trying to blame immigrants on housing crisis? You know, the truth here is that the landmass of Canada is more than US, and the population of 34 million cannot be overcrowded on the vast land of Canada. So what the government needs to do is to continue the development instead of blaming immigrants for the house crisis or housing issue. All these are planned and pre-planned and crafted and recycling, as I said. It's not an excuse. Now it's about the election around close to 1 year. The election is around the corner, so why using it to play politics? Every time there is election in Canada, it becomes issue of immigrants. So why allowing people to come in, leaving their work behind, and migrating to Canada, paying all this money in the portal, and after coming to Canada, you're telling them they need to go back after 1 year? I don't see any possibility of the immigration policy being reformed to the perfect situation. In terms of reducing the refugees, the issue of refugee have to do with the international convention. It's not about regional policy. It's an international law, and for you to be a refugee, you need to demonstrate that you have a founded fear of persecution from your country of origin. So issue of refugee should not come in to play politics or for a campaign matter or election issue. The government knows what they are doing. I don't know how this issue could be resolved, but I believe that any immigration minister who does not follow this crafted and recycled policy may be removed, because now I understand the reason why they always remove immigration ministers after 1 year, after 6 months, after 1 year plus, because since 2015, the Trudeau government took over the government under the Liberal, there has been, if you check on the screen, up to almost 8 immigration ministers. Still, the crisis is still there. Why is this happening? I could not understand why the government cannot make a permanent solution. It's not that the population is too much, it's not that the immigrant is taking up the job. Even the Canadians they are talking about giving that job are still the immigrants. So when you allow people to come here through the expression of interest, or through the skilled worker program or pathway, they should be allowed. Even those that finish their school and got a permanent job should be allowed to stay. So I could not understand why it become an issue that the government cannot put a permanent solution for the immigration, other than trying to make it more complicated. Okay, the Minister of Immigration and Minister of Public and Safety should at least visit some detention centers to ascertain why some people are being detained, why some people are being tortured, why some people that have issue of mental illness being forced to leave, claiming that they will have medical adequate medical treatment from their country. We should also understand what is called agent of persecution. Agent of persecution is a country police or country of persecution who engage in persecuting individuals based on religion, ethnicity, and gender. And the Convention of 1951, Geneva Convention, stipulated what is a refugee and who is a well-funded refugee. But if you are coming to Canada, whatever application you want to file, I will advise you to use an expert. All thought that, the decision is based on the immigration officer. They decide whatever they want. But I will advise you to use a consultant or a lawyer so you don't fall a victim. And do not, encourage to, stay in Canada illegal, because there's nothing you can do. You cannot have access to medical record. You cannot have access to, medication. So it does not worth it for you to be on the ground. But I would like you to continue to do a comprehensive research if you're trying to come to Canada before you make the move, so that you don't fall the victim based on the immigration policy that is not.
Thousands of international students, including Indian.
I'm going to let you also to listen to this, as this has been a topic, hence the election is around the corner, so that you can understand why the government need to do something very fast in order to reform the policy. Otherwise, things are not going to work. People will continue suffering. I'm going to let you.
Across the country. They fear deportation due to recent federal policy changes impacting immigrant workers under the Justin Trudeau government. So, what are the work permits and deportation fears? According to City News Toronto, over 70,000 graduates are at risk of deportation while their work permits expire later this year. The Canadian government's new policy, announced on Tuesday, will allow fewer temporary foreign workers. This follows a January decision to cut new international student permits by 35% starting from the 1st of September this year. Additionally, from September, international students will be limited to working only 24 hours a week off campus. Nationwide protests triggered. Students have been staging protests, including setting up encampments outside the Legislative Assembly in Prince Edward Island. Similar protests are happening in Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbia. Protesters are reacting to provincial policies that have reduced permanent residency nominations, leaving many students vulnerable to deportation. Blame for housing and job crisis. International students and immigrant workers are also protesting narratives that blame them for housing and job shortages. Advocacy groups like the International Sikh Student Organization argue that these problems stem from a broader policy issue. Calls for government action. Student advocacy groups are urging the government to extend work permits and create clear paths to permanent residency, emphasizing their contributions to the economy of Canada. Federal policy changes. On Monday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced tighter restrictions on temporary foreign workers in low-wage streams. Employers can now only hire up to 10% of their workforce from this category, down from 20%. The changes take effect on the 26th of September. Additionally, the government will stop processing applications from regions with unemployment rates over 6%, and workers can only stay in low-wage jobs for a maximum of 1 year, down from 2. Context and government response. The reliance on temporary foreign workers in Canada increased after the pandemic. In 2023, 83,643 positions were approved in the low-wage stream, a sharp rise from the 28,121 in 2019. The government also aims to reduce the proportion of temporary residents from 6.2% to 5% in the next 3 years, as stated by Canadian Immigration Minister Mark Miller.
Here's a brand new, better way to sell your house. So if you're thinking about selling anywhere in or around the greater
You had almost everywhere across the country is the same issue. But the most important is election is around the corner. And that is why this issue is coming up. Immigrants are now being used for campaign promises. And then after the election, whoever wins the election, will moot his promises and making it impossible for immigrants, to extend their hope or their faith or rely on those bogus promises which the government is trying to, stop, because the government is going on their own interests. I would like you as well to listen for this.
International travelers may be returning, but fewer foreign students are coming to Canada. Not a big surprise because the federal government capped the number earlier this year. CTV's Rachel Aiello joins us now. Rachel, this has translated into a real revenue hit.
Marilla, a group representing Canadian universities is warning that the federal government's cap on international students has put a bigger chill on enrollment than expected.
As university students head back to campuses across Canada, this year, fewer international students will be among them. According to Universities Canada, enrollment from outside the country has dropped below the federally imposed cap on student visas.
But what we are seeing is a real steep decline in interest, which has obviously led to a decline in applications to universities.
Back in January, amid headlines about the system spiraling out of control, the government put limits on postgraduate work permits and announced a 2-year cap on the number of international student applications it would approve. This year, the target was set at 364,000 undergraduate study permits, a 35% decrease from the nearly 560,000 issued in 2023. Fearing major financial impacts, universities now want a pause on any future changes.
What we are seeing now is Canada's reputation as a premier destination for education taking a hit.
The federal government stands by the decision, and after tightening temporary foreign worker rules this week, indicated changes could also be coming to permanent resident levels.
Not cosmetic changes simply to deal with public opinion, real significant change.
Amid affordability concerns, recent polling shows Canadians believe federal immigration targets are too ambitious.
Although jobs and the economy is at the top, one of the fastest growing issues of concern is actually immigration. It's doubled actually in the last 4 weeks.
The Conservatives say Canada needs to cut its population growth, setting the stage for immigration to be a hot political topic this fall.
We need to have a growth rate that is below the growth in housing, healthcare, and employment.
Marilla, universities say they won't know the full impact of fewer international enrollments until September, when students start showing up for class.
Rachel is in Ottawa.
The funny thing is that you can hear the prospects minister, somebody contesting under the Conservative government, which for the upcoming election, and you heard what he said, that Canada population need to slow down. You see, this is going to be worse. The point is that even if Liberal is out of the government, there is no alternative to such change to counterbalance the immigration issue. All thought that under the Liberal government, they could not get things under control, but they are still better than other proposals, because the Conservative is even against of growth of the Canadian population, which does not make sense. So that shows you that it's going to get worse, because what they are doing is another government come, it posts what other government did, in terms of immigration and implement their own, another minister come, they should have a common goal, not for the interest of the party or interest of individual. I could not understand, comprehend why a prospect candidate of a conservative government who is going to run against liberal next election, close to 1 year, will say that he is not in support of the Canadian population growth, that population growth need to go below the housing project. When the vast land of Canada everywhere is forest. I don't see what kind of ambition these people have. Okay, so it's not issue of humanity. It's not issue of, adequate policy to suit the international standard, but it's based on individual ideology, which is not about, creating a policy that can put this situation to the rest based on the international standard. I'm glad, as I said, that the United Nations have issued a statement based on that. Another thing I need to bring to the attention of this government, whether it's public and safety minister, whether it's immigration minister, whether it's prime minister, to be aware the torture going on in Canada. When they want to deport someone and the person refuses to leave, the treatment the person gets is more than torture under the against the Convention of Torture. The government need to be aware. The regional manager of Canada Border Service Agency and Citizenship and Immigration should be checkmates because they are aware of what the officers are doing. The Canada immigration policy is supposed to base on prospect of setting an international stage, not making it to be more, difficult. And I believe this immigration minister is putting the effort of the Canadian immigration, image down because he's creating confusion by implementing a script instead of following the reality. So my point here is that if you are planning to come to Canada, sell off all what you have, check all the alternative around you to make sure that you are taking a right decision. Put a call across those already here to find out exactly what is going on because people are really stranded. A lot of people with families are being deported. A lot of families have been separated here in Canada, leaving the children behind on the other side of the world, sending people who have already established in Canada with their family and children, separating them is not a right way for immigration minister to leave a legacy. If the current immigration minister does not know exactly what he intends to do, should consult people and work with them in order to create the permanent solution to this issue. I'm going to come back in a short while. Welcome back, and I'm almost coming to the end of this program, and you must understand the points I'm trying to, emphasize is for you not to come to Canada and be a victim of circumstances of the crafted and recycled immigration policy, because I want you to have time to go through my program to understand if you want to travel to Canada, you have to put your interest first. because the government also put their own interest first. Do not separate your family by coming to Canada thinking they will join you within 1 year or 2 years. That will not happen. You may end up 10 years and losing that marriage. This is what I'm going to tell you because I have seen on so many situations where immigration separated the family, sending the man with the out to Africa and leaving the kids behind, or bundling a family without giving them a chance, okay, to put their things together and deport them. This is happening real in Canada. If nobody wants to tell you, I'm telling you, I'm here. I know what is going on. I'm being into the system. Nobody can tell me what is going on into the system. Forget about what every other person is telling you. People cannot really tell you what they are passing through in Canada. I'm not saying it's not a good country. What I'm saying is I'm trying to stop people making the move that they will regret and become stranded and leaving their loved one behind that they may not be able to see again forever. Some people had been here looking for paper and lost people in their family, and they cannot see them again. They can't see their parents, they can't see their mother, they can't see their siblings, they can't see their children, and something may happen that they will never see them forever. The government is very strict. They are not acting the way you think, reading things on internet. You really need to think twice if you want to migrate to Canada. If you have a better job wherever you are, it will be on your own best interest to maintain your work. It will be your own best interest to, find alternative what you intend to do. It will be your own best interest to continue to work wherever you are, to build your family wherever you are. It will be on your own interest for you not to come to Canada and leave your family behind. And by the end of the day, you find out that you have lost everything and nobody is on your own interest. Nobody care about you, your family, your wife, your children. Everybody will leave you behind because you had from the immigration minister, you heard from the minister of public and safety, you heard from the the prime minister. It's all about the interest of the government, not you. So have it in mind before you make such move. I will leave you again to listen from immigration minister. All thought that all of what he's saying is not making sense because he said this to please everybody and people clap all over the world. Then the next one, he turned around and changed the concept. So you will not know exactly which way out other than, doing a comprehensive research. I'm going to let you see and listen once again before I go off. Thank you for being here.
Et que le Canada conserve sa réputation mondiale, nous devons applications will be accepted in 2025 will be reassessed at the end of this year. Nous continuons en outre à travailler avec les provinces et les territoires, les établissements d'enseignement désignés, les acteurs de l'éducation nationale, des réformes plus larges sur l'élaboration d'une voie plus durable pour les étudiants internationaux, y compris la finalisation du cadre des établissements reconnus que j'avais annoncé l'année dernière.
Vous sachiez aussi, on parle du Mexique aussi.
Incentives and perverse incentives, and it's something that we need to address. And then there's clear instances of people that have been just making money hand over fist about this. But again, we don't want our best top academic institutions to be penalized. It's why we have exemptions for master's and PhD students, because those are the bright people that we need to retain. And now you will hear from some provinces quite clearly that there are some trade schools that they will want to exempt or give postgraduate work permits to, because that is where some of the needs are, whether it's in nursing or healthcare or in construction. But what I say to them is we'll work with them, and we'll work with them to get this done. Rafi, I just want to repeat in French. Je vais essayer de répéter le système, ce que j'ai dit en anglais, sans faire de la soi-disant translation. Je ne suis pas le ministre du financement de l'éducation postsecondaire. C'est clair qu'il y a le potentiel d'avoir un impact sur les institutions. Ce sont des institutions qui sont intelligentes. Ils savent qu'ils peuvent avoir des frais de scolarité qui sont 4-5 fois plus hautes que ce que mes enfants payent à McGill ou à Acadia. Et puis, on agit en conséquence. Donc, ils ont renfloué les coffres. Et c'est clair que depuis au-delà d'une décennie, les provinces sous-financent l'éducation postsecondaire à travers le Canada. D'autres, plus que certaines provinces plus que d'autres. Et ces institutions ont agi en conséquence. Donc, la réalité, c'est qu'il va y avoir un impact, mais c'est un système qui n'a pas été désigné pour avoir ce budget, surtout avec notre niveau.
So that will be for today, and we will continue our program by next week. Thank you, and have a nice day.